And now I have to follow Maria. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about cultivating the absurd, another avenue to epiphany. Oh, that way. All right. I really do work in the tech world, I swear. So I'm going to start a little bit about me to give some background. So my name's Danielle Strachman. I'm the program director of the Thiel Fellowship. It was started in 2010 by Peter Thiel, who is the co-founder of PayPal. And the idea was, could you unburden young people to do new and innovative things if they didn't have to worry about college debt, and if they had the time, which offers much freedom, to do what they wanted to do within their projects? And so we give for 2 years $100,000 to 20 young people. We also give them mentorship opportunities and resources to work on their scientific and technical innovation. Another program, though, that has stemmed out of the Thiel Fellowship is the under 20 community. We saw an outcry from so many young people applying to our program who were doing amazing things. And I honestly feel sad, like as the person who responds to people and says, I'm so sorry, we only have 20 spots and unfortunately cannot give you one. I really wanted to find a way to give value to young people, and there's a great way to do that, and all it is bringing them together. And so twice a year we have these large summits. The last one we had 300 young people come in, and it's great to see them bond and talk with each other and come to retreats like this and keep doing what they're doing anyways. So these are the two programs that we run. Many people have different ideas about what the Thiel Fellowship is. I'd like to think that we're unleashing superheroes on the world. People often ask me, how did you get into your position with the Thiel Fellowship? And it really starts back in 2002. I had finished college. I had a degree in psychology and performance music, and I was headed towards the graduate school path. I had gotten an internship in neuropsychology, doing research and working with patients, and I found it really interesting. And I got a lot of kudos for it. A lot of people, I get sort of like pats on the head, if you will, of, oh, neuropsych, that's so interesting, you must be so smart, like things like that. It's interesting because earlier in my college career, I had thought about going into education, and even younger when I told people I wanted to do something in education, whether it was be a teacher or work with children, something like that. People said there's no money in that, those who can't teach, all these horrible, horrible things. But from getting all these kudos about neuropsych, I thought, well, I'll go into that. However, as I was thinking about going to graduate school, my insides really started to shake up quite a bit. And I was making this big decision about what should I do with the next number of years of my life. I had met grad students, and many of them didn't come out until they were 30, and had good experiences there, but it was a lot more school, a lot more time, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to dedicate something to that. And there are all these moments in your life that always add up to these pivotal points, and one of those pivotal points for me was watching the movie Vanilla Sky. And I should really watch it again because I haven't seen it for a long time, but in the moment, in 2002 when I watched it, it had this interesting combination of awe-inspiring, because it's like visually very beautiful movie, but also absurd. There's this surrealistic aspect where the character is going between reality and this dreamlike state, and you don't really know what's going on. But there was a key takeaway for me in that movie, and the key takeaway was that you only have one life, and you've really got to do what you know is right for yourself, and you have to do it right now. And that's when my early quarter-life crisis started, was directly after watching that film. And I really thought to myself, oh my God, I'm about to sign up for 7 more years of school. And I realized I wasn't really passionate about neuropsych. I got a lot of kudos for it. It seemed interesting. But I wasn't doing the things with that like what I would do with other passions I had. When I was a kid, I loved playing clarinet, and I loved animals, and I loved teaching, and I would spend a lot of time on those types of things outside of school and cultivating those interests. I wasn't doing that with neuropsych. I wasn't reading neuropsych books for fun, essentially. And I made a promise to myself. I thought to myself, if growing up means that you roll out of bed not loving what you want to do, then I never want to grow up. And so what I said was, I'll know if I'm on the right path if when I roll out of bed each morning, I'm inspired and just ready to go. So that was a promise that I've kept to myself ever since that day, and I'm now 33 years old. So I did what every person does when they have a crisis. I moved to California. Although you could also just move to Chattanooga. I think it was really just getting out of my comfort zone and going someplace completely new. So I moved from Boston to California. And I started my own tutoring company. A lot of people said, there's no way you can make money in doing this. I've tried tutoring before. It won't work. You won't get enough work. You'll have to have a part-time job, things like that. I was lucky enough that my parents are also entrepreneurial. So my view of work was that you always made your own money, that you didn't just get a job with somebody else. And I started my tutoring company, and I combined my interest with neuropsych with this individualized education that I wanted to give to people. And it went really well. I ran my company for a number of years. I eventually hired on contractors to take other work that I couldn't take. My grandfather would always say, when are you going to get a real job? And I'd say, Grandpa, what are you talking about? I have, and he'd say, you need job security. And I'd say, Grandpa, I have 15 clients right now. If one leaves, I have 14 jobs still going. And then he'd say, well, what about health insurance? I have health insurance, Grandpa. And then he'd say, well, what about retirement? And I'd say, I have 2 retirement accounts. And then he's like, okay, that's fine. And along the path of working with students, I ended up getting really integrated into the homeschooling community in San Diego. This is Christine Kuglin and her 4 children. She ran a homeschool co-op in the area, and I just fell in love with working with these students. As much as I loved working with all kinds of kids, whether they were in private school or public school, I was essentially going in to help with things that they didn't want to do because a lot of it was not by choice. So it was kind of like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. So I was trying to make things fun and interesting. There was even a teacher who was giving homework assignments he'd used for 20 years that referenced Bruce Springsteen. There was all kinds of stuff going on. But when I met homeschoolers, there was this light that came out of their eyes. I would go over to their houses and they would say, wow, Danielle, can you stay longer today? Can we do math and English and some science today? And I love diving into new topics, so it was a real treat for me. And so I worked with Christine in her co-op that she had started, and one day she came to me with this crazy idea. And she said, I'm thinking about starting a school. Would you do it with me? And I thought that she was crazy. I thought, we hate school. What are you talking about? Like, we've got this co-op, it's all good. But we did it anyways. So Innovations Academy is a public charter school that's K-8 in San Diego. We opened in 2008 with 180 students, and we're going into our 6th year of operation now with 350 students and looking to expand to a high school. And what we've tried to do is take that which we can see works in homeschooling with relationship building and project-based learning and bring it into the classroom. And it was a really amazing thing that we did. We still sort of pinch each other, and we like to say this phrase, who allowed that? Like, we're both just these people who put one foot in front of the other and just make something happen. But so we did that, and it was one of the most amazing things that I've done. And also, one thing to think about with these things, my business and my school, is people would often say, well, when are you going to go back and get your real education? Are you going to get a master's or a PhD? And I would always tell people, I think I should have gotten my honorary master's for the business I started and an honorary PhD for the school I started. What I'm really loving about the Teal Fellowship is that that statement is not nearly as absurd as it used to be. So there was a transition that I had. Being a school principal was one of the most amazing things I ever did, and it was also one of the most stressful. And I knew that I needed to back away from it. And so I decided I would take some time and figure out what am I going to do next. And I made another move. I moved to the Bay Area, and I decided I'd do something different. I would take some time off, which I'm a workaholic. I'd never done that before. It would have been really easy for me to go to San Francisco and start up my tutoring company or start another school or just dive in really quick. But I decided I'm just going to have sort of a staycation and chill out for a while and see what happens. And that was supposed to be 6 months. 3 months into my staycation, someone called me up and said, from the Teal Foundation, and said, the the Teal Foundation has essentially lost their mind. They want to do this crazy program where they encourage young people to work on their projects outside of school, and they need someone to run this program, and you would be really perfect for this. And I had gotten other offers from other companies and other foundations, asked me to run programs for them. And in a down economy, I was feeling like, oh God, like I feel bad turning this away. But when this popped up, I said, never mind, staycation, be gone. I need to come back out and work on this project. And that was the start of the Teal Fellowship, and I absolutely love the work that I do there. Now, however, the second part of my talk is actually not about education. It's about what led me into where I have seemed to go in every part of my path, and that's about cultivating the absurd. And I'm going to take a look over here for a quick second. Yes. So last month, I was at a music festival, and it's sort of an alternative music festival. Somebody was playing the stand-up shovel. People want to call it a bass, but it was this large shovel, and it had bass strings on it. It was like really radical. And someone else was playing this other weird instrument that was like a harp, but not a harp. And people were playing crazy music. And it was a crowd of mostly 30-ish-year-old people. And I'm sitting there listening to some music, and there's this DJ, and he has wild hair. It's like teal-colored hair. And he's got this crazy elephant hat on his head. It's all fuzzy. And I'm looking at him, and I'm introspecting on myself in the moment, saying, this is bizarre. When I was 12, I was really introverted and shy. I hated crowds. I would never have gone to something like this. And I thought, this is so absurd that I'm here at this music festival, and I kept staring at this guy with the elephant hat and just thinking, that is absurd. Like, this guy's like 35 years old, and he's got purple hair or teal hair, and he's got an elephant on his head, and he's just doing his music thing. This is really interesting. And something about that moment, there was a click for me about the absurd and about how profound viewing something that is absurd can be. So I've been thinking about this. This was about a month ago, and I have sort of a theory, a recipe, that when you have things that are a combination of awesome or awe-inspiring and absurd, that which is silly or outrageous, you can get these epiphanies potentially, or it can be a recipe for an epiphany, these striking moments that you have in your life. So we'll talk about awesome for a moment. I think that awesome or awe-inspiring is really about cultivating gratitude. And so as an example, I was driving down the road the other day with a day much like today with a beautiful blue sky in the air. And I was thinking about apples. And I was like, wow, apples are awesome. They grow off trees and we can eat them. We don't die from eating them. Like, the world is this marvelous place. I was having this sort of grandiose moment about apples. And there's nothing absurd about apples, but they are truly awesome. And I think we talk about cultivating gratitude a lot. So this is actually not the part I'm going to be talking about so much, but this part. So we've got apples with faces. Most of us, I think, would say, oh, apples with faces, that's kind of weird. All right, and we'd stop our thought there. However, I think there's something to pulling out our thoughts more on that which is absurd and think about, well, what if fruit had faces? Or what if the world were different? Or why do we do things the way we do? Why don't we do more artistic things with apples? If you start pulling out those sorts of abstractions, you can start coming away with some really interesting ideas. I also think it's important because it really shakes your brain up. When you fall into an absurd situation, you can step back and really look at it for a second. It gets you out of your ruts. Again, it's about asking what if or why. And what that leads to are really big breakthroughs. Obviously, at one time, people thought that the world was flat. Someone had to question this assumption, and people thought it was absurd that it could be any other way. We have companies like SpaceX, which are sending rockets into space, and their mission is to actually get people to be able to go to other planets. And this is an amazing thing. And we might think, I think right now we're all pretty savvy that we're like, yeah, someday we'll get there. So we might not think of this as absurd right now. But maybe like travel to other galaxies with people might be absurd to us. So it's about really being able to pull out those abstractions and think, what could we do instead? So how do you cultivate the absurd? So I think there's some minor and major ways you can do it. One is you can watch weird movies like Vanilla Sky, or listen to weird music, or Read science fiction, actually. I think that's a really good way to do it. Other ways are like these micro absurd actions you could do. Like if it would be weird for you to wear 2 different color socks, wear 2 different color socks around and see what sort of perspectives do you get from that. If it's wearing a funny hat, wear a funny hat. My cats. I think animals are really absurd. They do these crazy things. We try to put our own human ideas upon them, but they're just kind of wild. So even observing animals, I think, can bring out these moments. And then I think there are some advanced methods. So one actually is a historical one, which comes from Salvador Dali, the surrealist painter. I heard a story once that he would sit in an armchair and he would have a cup in his hand. And he would do this, he would just sit there with it when he was tired, and he would be falling asleep, and he would eventually drop the cup on the floor, and it would wake him up. And what he was trying to do was cultivate that moment in between when you're dreaming and falling asleep, because he thought that's where the weird thoughts are. That's where the absurdity is. And clearly he did pretty well with this because he's a highly respected artist these days. I haven't tried this myself, but I've actually really wanted to, so someday I'll get there. There are other ways that people can cultivate the absurd. This picture up on your right is one of our mentors. And one night, him and some friends decided, you know, we're going to dress up in funny costumes. We're going to go out somewhere in San Francisco, and we're going to hand out hamburgers. We're going to get a whole bunch of them, 30, 40, 50 of them, and we're going to ask people for a song for a hamburger and see what happens with that. And they had a really interesting experience. They met all walks of life of people, and they were able to bring joy and happiness. And I imagine people may have asked them things like, is this for a cause or is this for that? No, it's just because they were doing it. It was just for fun. And this is something that this particular group of friends and mentors does together. I ask them, next time they do it, I want to go. One of the last methods is some of these festivals. There's a lot of festivals that have some interesting experimental aspects. One that I go to is called Ephemeral, and it's actually where I met the foundation members that I work with today. And it's about experimenting with different forms of government on the water. So we go out for, it's built up to about a week-long event. We raft up boats, we build art-like structures, we build platforms, and we see like what would it be like to live out on the water for a week and more than just a boat. And going to things like that gives you more creativity, gives you more ideas, and you definitely get to meet a lot of people who have some absurd thoughts. So one thing to note is that absurdity is relative. To someone who's punk rock, it may be completely absurd for them to wear a suit and vice versa. So absurdity is all about where you're at and what would be stretching in your realm of possibility. So I want to leave you with embracing the absurd. Try asking next time something strange happens, well, what if this? Or why does that happen? And just see what comes out of it. Also, there are philosophers who have studied the absurd. One is Albert Camus, and he says, accepting the absurdity of everything around us is one step, a necessary experience. It should not become a dead end. It arouses a revolt that can become fruitful. And with that, I wish everyone in here many absurd experiences here in Chattanooga.